December of 1910, a young socialite and heiress to a massive fragrance fortune stepped out for an afternoon stroll and was never seen again. We're going to be talking about the strange and unsolved case of Dorothy Arnold's disappearance. She was heiress to one of the biggest fragrance names in the early 20th century, and today we're going to be covering her story and her family's influence on an episode of The Fragrance Report. If this is your first time watching or listening to this podcast, hello, my name's Anya. I love fragrances and I love talking about them. On this podcast, we focus mainly on fragrance history. We launch a new episode every single Wednesday on Spotify and on YouTube. So wherever you're watching or listening, welcome to the podcast. This is going to be a bit of a different episode this time because I wanted to tell Dorothy's story. I first heard about this article on Fragrantica, and I'll be linking the article in the show notes, but I was really curious about Dorothy Arnold because I, for one, am really interested in true crime anyway, and I have yet to really see many other stories that are true crime related to perfume, and since this has a historical twist to it, I figured we'd talk about it on a Fragrance Report episode. So without further ado, let's get started. So of course we're going to be talking about fragrance favorites first. These are the perfumes I have been obsessed with the most, starting off with what I'm wearing today. So this is called Déjà Le Printemps, and this is from the brand Orizia Le Grand. I bought this fragrance when I was in France, just I would say over a week ago at this point, and I have been loving it so far. It's a really interesting kind of like refreshing green fragrance, and there's something so calming about this. When I looked at the notes, I knew why, because there is a chamomile note in here that I absolutely love. There are additional notes of lily of the valley, green notes. There's also a bit of mint as well. There's some orange blossom, galbanum, and a bit of vetiver and cedar at the base. I really love this scent, and I feel like right now especially this is the fragrance for me. There's something about this perfume that's really drawing me in, and I love the tea-like aspect of here. I also like the kind of a refreshing mint, but this is one of the few mint fragrances that I've smelled that has that refreshing mint factor without having the mint overtake the entire fragrance. So I'm really happy to have this in my collection. Again, this is Déjà Le Printemps. Printemps spelled Printemps from the brand Orizia Le Grand. This is available at their storefront, but you can also get this at Lucky Scent as well. This is a French brand. So really obsessed with this one. Another fragrance that kind of became my signature scent when I was abroad, and also it has kind of become one of my favorite scents of this summer, is Lark's Calda. I've been getting compliments on this. This is one of those like really fun fragrances to wear because it has a tart quality to it, meaning there's some sweetness to it, but there's also like a slightly like sour touch to it that makes it kind of like interesting. And if you have smelled Delina, then you might already be familiar with how sometimes sweet fragrances can have like a tart accord to them, and in this case Lark's Calda mimics that tart nature. And what's interesting about this is that this perfume has like notes like cotton candy, strawberry, but it also has a green edge to it, meaning that this fragrance is sweet, but it also is balanced enough so that's not overpowering, which I really love and appreciate. And there's also a bit of a champagne note in here as well, meaning that this fragrance is particularly lovely for this time of year when you want something refreshing. But this fragrance is also something that really stays on the skin quite effectively. So I've been obsessed with this and really going through my bottle. Some other fragrances I've been loving are from the brand Heiress fragrances. What I've been doing lately, because I've been trying to use up more of my fragrances, especially the summery ones, is I've been trying to make sure that I'm not like neglecting any of my fragrances. And some fragrances that I have neglecting have been from this line. You might have heard me talk about Heiress there a little bit ago, and I have been obsessed with them, and they still are one of my favorite fragrance brands to experience. And I would say these two fragrances from the brand are the ones that I've been wearing the most. I bought their set of 4 fragrances. These are 20 milliliter sizes, and I have these two in front of me today. I have 7 Minutes, which is kind of like a really interesting like marshmallowy caramel vanilla fragrance. And then I also have Slow Sip, which is a tropical inspired boozy fragrance. It's inspired by a tropical cocktail, but it also has that booziness, and it's still a refreshing fragrance, but it's very smooth. And both of these fragrances are quite well blended, and they're great options for the summertime, and they can be layered on amongst each other or amongst other fragrances from the brand, or they can be worn with other fragrances as well, and that's what I've been really enjoying. So these two fragrances are absolutely lovely. And then I've also been obsessed with Love-O-Matic by Room 1015 to the point that I've been wearing this fragrance practically every day since I got it. It's kind of insane how much I've just fallen head over heels with this fragrance, because this is a really easy fragrance to love, and it's a really easy fragrance to wear, because it's by the way, this is Love-O-Matic by Room 1015. It's interesting because this is a clean musky fragrance, but it has some nuances to it in the form of strawberry, in the form of bazooka bubblegum in the background, and those kind of elements combine into a fragrance that's clean, musky smelling in the opening, but then it has like those nuances to it, making it a very interesting and kind of like comforting fragrance. Like, this is one of those perfumes that I keep going back to. It's lovely. I've been wearing this in my hair a lot. I've been wearing this paired with other fragrances. I will rarely wear this alone because I love to wear it on my clothes. I love to wear it on my hair, and then I like to wear like other fragrances like the Call de Fragrance over the top. You know, this is a fun fragrance for me to wear. Yes, it's on its own, but also wear it with other fragrances because it's just so delicious and so versatile for me. So I've really been loving this one. This bottle was sent to me, but I'm trying to work on getting a code with Room 1015 so you guys can save some money. But other than that, Room 1015 is a really affordable fragrance brand. They have some fragrances that are priced around $150 for the 3.4 ounce, which is comparable to designer pricing. And then of course they have some diversity in the sizes. You can get something smaller and save even more money. So Room 1015's Love-O-Matic, this is brand new, and I've very much been enjoying this. Let's get into the fragrance history portion of this podcast. Dorothy Arnold was actually born Dorothy Harriet Camille Arnold in New York City on July 1st, 1885. She was the second of 4 children to Francis Rose Arnold and his wife, Mary Martha Parks Arnold. She had an older brother. His name was John. He was born in December of 1884, and 2 younger siblings, Dan Hinckley, born February 1888, and Marjorie Brewster, born August of 1891. Her father was a Harvard University graduate, and he was a prominent partner at F.R. Arnold and Co., a company that imported perfumes and other luxury goods into the United States. Her family was extremely well connected. Her ancestors had come over on the Mayflower, and her paternal aunt was actually married to Supreme Court Justice Rufus W. Peckham. Her family standing was so prominent that they were listed in the social register and were considered really high-ranking members of New York society at this time. So let's talk a little bit about Dorothy's family and their background in the perfume trade. Her father, as I mentioned, the Harvard graduate, was a prominent partner at F.R. Arnold and Co., and his company was known as Purveyors of Fancy Goods, specializing in perfumes, colognes, powders, and soaps. And by the time of her disappearance, her family's company was already extremely well established in New York City. They were known for importing European fragrances from France, England, at a time when perfume was still considered a novel and still luxurious import to the United States. As early as 1890, the company had registered the trademark Lilac Blooms with an accompanying line of toiletries, powders, soaps, and perfumes in the United States. And over the subsequent years, they released fragrances like Maybells, Lilybells, Pavots, and Illuminettes, blending floral inspirations like lilac, lily, and poppy with the American penchant for novelty even into the 1820s. Keep in mind, around this time, even though aldehydes were coming into prominence, people were still very much drawn to fragrances inspired by florals, and the company was able to really cater towards this long-standing trend. So going back to Dorothy Arnold, she was actually someone who showed signs of being really interested in education, in writing. She was someone who basically was born into a family of great privilege at a time when women didn't really have a lot of rights. And in a way, her privileged upbringing afforded her opportunities that a lot of other women at this time would not have been able to partake in. She was educated at New York's Belton School for Girls and attended Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania, where she majored in literature and language. She graduated from college in 1905, and after her graduation, she continued to live at her family home at 108 East 79th Street and attempted to begin her career as a writer. Now, considering this time, it was pretty normal for young unmarried women to be living with their family, especially someone who came from such a well-established upbringing. And in the spring of 1910, she even submitted a short story for McClure's magazine, which unfortunately was rejected. Her friends and family treated her writing aspirations as a source of amusement. They teased her around the rejection, and because of this, she actually rented out a separate P.O. box to receive correspondence from magazines and publishing houses. She submitted a second short story to McClure's, which was The Poinsettia and the Flame, in November of 1910, and unfortunately that story was also rejected, leading her to feel defeated and embarrassed about attempting to become a writer. She had asked her family to allow her to move out into a separate apartment in Greenwich Village so she could continue her aspirations and continue to improve as being a writer, continue to try and break into this industry. And this was something that was forbidden for her family. They did not want her to move out. She also took a lover at this point. She wanted to marry this man who was not of a prominent social standing. In fact, he was unemployed, he was living with his family, and he was someone who was very much lower in terms of society compared to who she was, and her family was very much not approving of this match whatsoever. So she was definitely going through a lot of kind of trials and tribulations when it came to her family, her place in the world, and this all culminated around her disappearance in 1910. So on the morning of December 12th, 1910, Dorothy left her family home, informing her mother Mary that she intended to go shopping for a dress to wear for her younger sister's, Marjorie's, upcoming debutante party. And her mother offered to go with Dorothy, but Dorothy declined, saying that if she found a suitable dress that she liked, she would phone her mother herself. She left the family home at around 11 a.m. in the morning, and according to her family, she had approximately $25 to $30 cash in her possession. Today, that amount of cash would be around $844 to over $1,000 today. Keep in mind inflation since then. And she walked from her home on 79th Street to the Park and Tilford store on the corner of 5th Avenue and 59th Street. She was recognized at the store. This was a part of the town where she was widely recognized, as was customary, and she actually bought a half-pound box of chocolates, and this was charged to her account because they recognized who she was, so they charged it to her family's account at the store, and this was at around 12 p.m. in the afternoon. She took the box of chocolates, placed it in her muff, and then went on her way. She walked 22 blocks, which was about 1.5 miles south to Brentano's bookstore at 27th Street and 5th Avenue. While she was at the bookstore, she purchased Engaged Girl Sketches, a book of humorous essays by Emily Calvin Blake. and the clerks and the shopkeepers at both these stores basically said when they were questioned afterwards that she appeared completely normal. She was courteous and did not exhibit any unusual behavior. She even ran into a friend of hers, Gladys King, and the two women engaged in conversation about the upcoming debutante party. She told her friend that she was going for a walk through Central Park, and that was the last time anyone saw her around 2 p.m. in the afternoon. By the early evening, her absence had been noticed because she failed to return home for dinner, and she was someone who never missed meals without informing her family, and the Arnolds became worried. They started calling around to her friends to find her whereabouts. Unfortunately, no one had seen her. And then shortly after midnight on December 13th, Elsie Henry, one of Dorothy's friends, phoned the family home to see if she had returned. Her friend later recalled that her mother answered the phone and told her that she had returned home, but when her friend asked to speak to Dorothy, her mother hesitated and told her friend that Dorothy had gone to bed with a headache. And this is where it gets quite infuriating. Her family, despite knowing that Dorothy had not come home, they did not know where she was. They did not report her disappearance to the police for weeks. For weeks, no one knew where she was, and unfortunately, they were very much focused on what society would think of them. They knew that Dorothy had another lover, had someone that she wanted to marry, even though he was known to be in Europe at the time with his family, so he had an alibi for that. But it's really interesting because they were actually supposedly influenced by a 13-year-old girl's disappearance in 1909. This was Adele Boaz, and she was a 13-year-old girl who was reported missing from Central Park, and she was later found to have run away to Boston. Adele later returned home, but the Boaz family was also a prominent Upper East Side family, and this incident left the family scandalized and brought them to shame in the newspapers. And it's interesting that Dorothy's family looked at this occurrence and they just assumed that this might be the same case, so they decided to sweep it under the rug as much as they could. So they did not report her disappearance. They did not get investigators involved until the next year. And keep in mind, this happened in December, so this is January of the new year. They finally reported it to the authorities. So keep in mind, they're not reporting this incident to the police, and they're still worried, I guess. So they're trying to come up with a way to figure out what happened quietly and in private. So they contacted John S. Keith. He was a family friend and lawyer the morning following Dorothy's disappearance. And then Keith arrived at the family home and independently searched Dorothy's bedroom. He discovered that except for the outfit she was wearing, all her clothes and other personal belongings were accounted for. He also found personal letters with foreign postmarks and 2 folders for transatlantic ocean liners on her desk, as well as burned papers in her fireplace. The burned papers were presumed to be the rejected manuscripts Dorothy had submitted to McClure's. And over the following weeks, Keith visited jails, hospitals, and morgues in New York, Boston, and Philadelphia, but he could not find any signs of Dorothy. After several weeks of this exercise proved completely fruitless, he then suggested that the family hire private Pinkerton detectives to investigate the case further. After they hired the investigators, these detectives searched the hospitals and other areas that Dorothy was known to have frequented, looking for any sign of her. They couldn't find anything. Because of the information about the transatlantic ocean liners, there was some speculation that she had run away to Europe to elope, but they searched for her name and they searched for marriage records in Europe, and they couldn't find a match. And after the private lawyer and the Pinkerton detectives were still looking for Dorothy, they could not find any sign of her. They finally persuaded her father to report the case. to the authorities. The police advised him to host a press conference to try and get as much publicity and information out as possible, and her father resisted the suggestion. Keep in mind, this is now January of 1911, and he's still resisting the idea that he wants to make this case public. So on January 25th, they were finally able to persuade him to have the press conference. So on January 25th, 1911, reporters gathered at her father's New York City office, where he informed them of his daughter's disappearance and offered a $1,000 reward, which today is approximately $34,000 for information leading to her whereabouts. During this press conference, reporters asked him if there was any possibility that she had run away to be with a man. And keep in mind, at this point, her parents did not officially allow her to date. This, again, was not unusual because women of such a high social standing were expected to marry someone who their family chose, and she was not allowed to date at this point. This was not something that she was allowed to do. So the reporters were asking if she had or she could have run away to be with a man, and her father said, "I would have been glad to see her associate more with young men than she did, especially young men of brains and position, one whose profession or business would keep him occupied. I don't approve of young men who have nothing to do." And reporters later discovered that this comment was in reference to her lover, George Griscom Jr., a man she had met while attending Pernoire, and she was romantically involved with him. He was in fact a 40-year-old engineer who came from a wealthy Pennsylvania family, while he still lived with them at the Kenmare Hotel in Pittsburgh. Even though he came from a wealthy family, apparently they were not as wealthy as Dorothy's family was, and clearly her father disapproved of him. Reporters found out that in December of 1910, Dorothy had lied to her parents about where she was going. She had told them that she was going to visit a former classmate in Boston, and instead she spent a week in a hotel with her lover Griscom. And her parents found out about this after they discovered that she had pawned $500 worth of jewels to fund this week-long escape to Boston. Her family obviously disapproved of this match, and despite their disapproval, Dorothy continued to have a correspondence with this 40-year-old man. So as I mentioned before, Griscom was found to be vacationing with his parents in Europe, in Florence, Italy. So he was not someone who apparently could have had anything to do with the disappearance. That was considered a pretty solid alibi. However, her mother Mary decided to take Dorothy's brother John, and they even went to Europe directly, and they found his hotel room and they confronted him, asking if he knew anything about Dorothy's disappearance, and even then he maintained that he did not. By the end of January of 1911, the family had resigned themselves to believe that Dorothy was dead. The authorities still believe that she could be alive somewhere, but at this point her family had publicly said they believed that she was no longer living. Around this time, Francis Arnold told the press that he believed that from the start that his daughter had been attacked and killed when walking home through Central Park, and her body had been thrown into the Central Park reservoir. He cited two clues, which he would not publicly disclose, that he claimed confirmed his suspicions. Police dismissed this theory because in the days leading up to Arnold's disappearance, the temperature in New York City had dropped to 21 degrees Fahrenheit and the reservoir had frozen solid. Despite this, a search had still been conducted in Central Park, and no trace of Dorothy was ever found. And her case still remains today to be unsolved. His father, upon his death, did not name Dorothy as an heir, as a successor to his fortune, which is something to note because she had originally been someone who would have inherited part of his estate. But it was clear by the end that they did truly believe that she had been that she had passed away. And it's unfortunate because obviously we don't know what happened to her, and she seems to be like someone who was so interesting and so vivacious and so Maybe not someone who had a chance to do much with her life, but someone who certainly would have, I think, flourished had she not lived at the time where at which she was living. And I don't know. I think when I was reading the Fragrantica comments, I think there are some commenters that said that they would have liked, or they would like to think that she managed to kind of run away from her family's clutches and she was living a quiet life of her own volition somewhere else. And I would like to also believe that as well, but it's also very possible that she simply was attacked. She was carrying a lot of money, so she probably was attacked and killed, but obviously it would be nice to kind of like think about the positive side of things. Let me know if you appreciated or if you found this kind of true crime version of the fragrance report interesting, and I would happily do some more versions of this. So yes, let me know what you think of Dorothy's disappearance. I was very much interested to read about her story, and I'm curious to hear what you think about it as well. Thank you for listening to the end of this podcast episode, and I will see you in the next one.
This episode's music was brought to you by Kevin McLeod over at Incompetech. This is Beauty Flow by Kevin McLeod at Incompetech.com and is licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license.